Hi, in the last video, we created a simple game using the MutationObserver API alongside some other things, but our main focus was the MutationObserver API, and I think with that project you should be able to have a full understanding of how the MutationObserver API works. But here in this video, hopefully this video will be a very short one. I just want to discuss two more methods of the MutationObserver object that I forgot to talk about in the previous videos. So if you haven't watched the previous videos, you can watch them. I'll put a link to the playlist in the description of this video. Now, this observer here, it's currently working. Like, if you have to check out what's currently happening in the browser, so let's just check that in the browser and see what's currently happening, because we want to discuss about two methods of the observer: how to stop the observer and how to take current, like existing records from it. I'm going to explain better when we have to test those, but for now let's just see what we currently have. So here, this is what we currently have, and here this is it. So basically we created this game in the last video. You can check the last video out, as I said earlier. So, and it's working fine. So what we want to do now is we want to disable the MutationObserver that we are using to get the changes made to this UL, because this is basically a UL and has two LIs in it by default. That is how we set it. So we now set the content editable to be true, which means we can edit the content. And whenever we edit the content, we are using the MutationObserver API to get the values that have been entered into it and other things like that. So what we want to do now is we want to take a look at how to disable this MutationObserver. That is, so the observer won't actually observe the node, which is the UL that we actually stated in the observe method, as we did in the last video. So let me just go back into the editor and see, and we should just explore the two methods that I said we'll be discussing here. And here, as you can see, we have the list element here, which is the UL that we got up here. And for us to just disable this observer here, what we have to do is to use the disconnect method. So let's do it this way. I'm going to do a set timeout for the function. So what I'm going to be doing in this function is I'll disable the observer, but I'll make it after 10 seconds. So I'll just say observer dot disconnect, and then after disconnecting the observer, let's log disconnected into the console. So we can just say console.log, and we have disconnected here, like that. And the last thing we want to do is to specify the timeout, like the number of seconds here is 10, because we have 10,000, and bear in mind that this one is in milliseconds. So 10,000 milliseconds is 10 seconds, which means after 10 seconds we want to disconnect the observer. We want to stop the observer from from monitoring this node here. Not just this one, assuming we have connected more than one node to this observer, the observer will stop listening for changes in all of them, so it's going to be disabled. That's what this disconnect method is for. So let's go back into the browser and see what happens after 10 seconds. So let me just refresh, and notice that right now we are not up to 10 seconds yet. So let's just say yes, and then skin. After 10 seconds this will stop working like that. And the last one we have is and now as you can see the observer has stopped working, because normally if it were still working, as I'm entering a wrong input here, it should circle the li in a red border. So let me refresh it so you can see what's happening. So as you can see, currently it's circling it with red borders because this thing is not complete, the value is not complete. As you can see now, it's normal working after 10 seconds. And if we take a look at the console, we have disconnected here, which means we have actually disconnected, we have disabled the observer, and that is what the disconnect method is for. So the second method we are going to take a look at is the takeRecords method. So let me go back into the editor and see what happens, what the takeRecord method is all about. So basically, the takeRecords method, what it does is that it actually takes the records the records that represent changes that have been detected by the observer. It takes them and then it empties the record queue. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, we made a change to the UL now. I'm just using the UL as an example. We made a change, so that change has caused the observer to create a mutation record object like this. But then that object has not yet been processed by our callback function here. And when we call takeRecords, it's going to return this object here as an array. If it is 1, the number of items in the array will be just this one, will be 1, and the content is going to be just this one object. If more than one changes have been detected by the observer, like let's say for example, I said in a previous video that sometimes one change can lead to multiple reports. So let's say we have 2 reports like this, and when we call takeRecords, if these reports have not yet been processed by our callback, and when I say the callback, I mean the function that we passed to the constructor. So if these objects here, they haven't yet been processed by the callback function that we passed to the mutation record constructor, whenever we call takeRecords, at that time it's going to return these 2 objects as an array because they have not yet been processed. And after returning the 2 as an array, it's going to empty whatever we have here like this. So the record queue, this is what we mean by the record queue. The record objects that are created by, that are returned from this observer whenever it detects a change. So that's what we refer to as record queue, the queue that actually contains the records that represent the changes detected by the observer. So, and this is the function I was referring to the other time when I said the callback function that we passed to this. Whenever a change is detected, it's the mutation record objects, array of mutation record objects, they are passed to this function here. So if at the time we call takeRecords, we have a change which is going to be represented by a mutation record object, if we have one or more of those objects that have not yet been processed by this callback function, they are going to be returned by that takeRecords method. So let's take a look at how it works. So here, let's modify it. Let's say after 10 seconds we say observer.takeRecords like this. So let's quickly read something here. As you can see, empties the record queue and returns what was in there. And I said before that the record queue is the queue that contains the list of records that have not yet been processed by our callback. So observer.takeRecords, and we want to store that in a variable. So let's just say const on processed records is going to be equal to this, and we now want to log it into the console. So we can just say console.log on processed records, like that. So let's go back into the browser and see what's happening. So this is what we have to explain in this video. Once this works the right way, then we go in. Most of the time the observer.takeRecords might be returning an empty array, because JavaScript is really fast. Now whenever the change is detected, it's immediately passed to the callback function and it executes it immediately. But if for some reason, and most of the time when you use this takeRecords, it's advisable to use it before calling disconnect if you care about the changes that have been detected but have not yet been processed by the callback function. So it's very useful to use this takeRecords method to get the array of objects that have not yet been processed, like that. So let's go back into the browser. Let me then refresh this and let's see what happens. Let me just click here like this. So we are expecting, after 10 seconds. So let's see. As you can see, this array, it's actually an empty array. We have disconnected because we logged it into the console after disconnecting, after disabling the observer by using the disconnect method. And this one, we got the number of the records that have not yet been processed, and if you look at this, the length is 0 because there is no unprocessed record in the record queue, and that's why we're having 0 here. So that's basically it for this video. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it. And if you haven't watched the previous videos, as I said before, check the description of the video for the link to the playlist where you can watch all other videos relating to the MutationObserver object that I've just created. And consider subscribing to this channel if you are interested in stuffs like this. I basically post videos about web development and anything software in general. Thank you and bye for now.